So we guys will continue with King David and Egypt's foreign policy under Sadat. And again, the questions we try to answer, um, the changing domestic environment and how it affected the decision making and the perception and the values of the decision maker, especially like we are talking about the president, the personality of Sadat throughout the 70s, and then how he concluded, separate peace treaty with Israel, and how they came to the terms at Camp David. So after highlighting the main domestic economic and military constraints and challenges imposed on Egypt under Sadat, and the institutional setting and how he eliminated, the country or purged, his regime of power centers, that they actually asked it, or they felt like they were entitled, to collectively govern with Sadat, and he managed to eliminate, all these threatening, powerful sources in order to rule and in order to plan for the war later. So the same domestic setting, nothing, he didn't he just started to undertake some political reform measures in the late 70s after the war. But before the 1973, he will just try to establish his own legitimate power base, and he suffered a lot in order to break away or to break with the Nasserism or the heritage and the heavy legacy of Nasserist ideology. As I mentioned, he had no wide room for deviation from the main two pillars of Nasserism, anti-imperialism and pan-Arabism. And he repeatedly tried to exhibit or to expose, to project the image of this adherence of Nasserism or Nasser principles. So he tried actually in 1972 to establish this Federation of Arab Republics with Syria and Libya. Sudan, tried to get in the beginning, and then Numeri dropped out. So he just, he didn't genuinely believe in this pan-Arabism and the establishment of this federal unions. But he tried, to give it a try in order to legitimize his rule or his own governance, his own as to project the image of again affiliation with Nasserist ideology. So firstly, he tried to eliminate, the regime of from the power centers, and he tried to kind of not to reestablish, but again to remind the Egyptians, about the close affinity and the bond with Nasserism. So in order to exert pressures on remnants of Nasserism and leftists in his regime, so he tried to approach, the other Arab countries in order to project the image of, pan-Arabism. He gradually modified, the main elements of Nasserism by narrowing down, this anti-imperialist discourse or anti-imperialism and limited, this anti-imperialism discourse to anti-Zionism by basically focusing on liberating, territories and recovering the Egyptian lands. And he totally reversed, this anti-Western orientation by approaching the United States, and he tried to gradually, to confine, pan-Arabism to Egyptian patriotism or Egyptian affairs by elaborating on Egyptian or highlighting this Egyptian first attitude. And after the war, he elaborated more on this by framing it within prestige and dignity of Egyptians. So he tried to break loose, of Nasserism and pan-Arabism that, it was kind of a challenge or a constraint. It was already under Nasser before his death, but it became much more pronounced, under Sadat. And especially with the the real existence and the real occupation of the Egyptian lands, it added like one more layer in order to break away or to find another ideological legitimate foundation of the regime for the regime. Um, so he actually tried, like, the economic situation was really deteriorating. People started like really getting angry and like worried about this prolonged period of no war, no peace status. Some every now and then, like some students demonstrations erupted in order to pressure Sadat, or in order to articulate more economic grievances. So the economic situation, like didn't couldn't afford any more delay with the war. So that's why he had, like, to take a step in order to recover or to liberate the Egyptian territories. So it was like a very decisive moment in October 1973, when he took a decision of this coordinated Arab attack by coordinating with the Syrian army in order to coordinate attack on the Israeli forces. So in October 1973, he tried, like to, like, the Israeli forces got accustomed to this military maneuvers and like false alarms of troops concentrations, like they were taking troops were taking place at the front lines. So that was the case until the day before the attack, and then they decided to launch the attack at 2 p.m. It was Ramadan, the fasting month for Muslims in Egypt. So they decided to have, like the attack on the at this time in this month, and it was totally kind of unexpected by the Israeli forces. This coordinated Arab attack did well in the beginning. Like Syria tried to attack on the front of the Golan Heights in order to allow for Egyptian troops or Egyptian forces to advance and to establish their equipment in order to cross the canal. And they broke the Barlev line that was raised to of a height of like 12 meters. And within like 24 hours, they managed to penetrate 10 kilometers beyond the line. But it was like the Israeli forces were busy with fighting or pushing the Syrian troops back off the Golan Height. And after 1 week, they concentrated after pushing them back, the Syrians back of the Golan Heights. So they returned to the southern front in Egypt and actually reversed a little bit the tide of the battle. So the IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces, with the help of the United States aircraft, it allowed for the United States actually support and the military advancement. They secured kind of military supremacy of the Israeli forces, not only in numbers, but also in the military equipment or advancement. So the Israeli forces found kind of a weak spot between along the canal between the second and the third armies, and they pressed through it and crossed the canal north of the kind of the Great Bitter Lakes. And they actually managed to surround the Third Army, and some Egyptian units tried to find their way out of the encirclement. So the situation remained the same with the surrounding the Third Army and cutting any kind of communication and any kind of food supplies or any kind of supplies to the army, until like the Sadat approached the United States in order to pressure Israeli government to accept or to to actually to have like a UN or a Security Council resolution of ceasefire first, and then to oblige the Israeli government to abide by the resolution. So the Security Council actually had like the resolution of the ceasefire, and it took like a week or something, or several days, in order for the Israeli government to get convinced in order to abide by the resolution. The United States actually helped with the Kissinger and his what was called shuttle diplomacy, as you're gonna like see, helped a lot, with getting both parties or both sides to negotiate and to implement the Security Council resolution. And actually, the Saudi Arabia and some other countries, they embarked on this oil diplomacy, and they decided, to they took a decision with the oil embargo in order to pressure more the United States and other European countries in order to exert more pressures on Israel in order to weaken, its leverage a little bit. Some countries actually, some European countries and Japan actually asked Israel in order to abide by the United Nations resolutions, and they actually admitted some of the Palestinians' rights. So actually, after the war, Sadat managed, to introduce some new elements and new priorities, on top of the political agenda. So he approached more the United States, that was needed as a great power in order to reach kind of a settlement with Israel. And he managed, Kissinger tried, to mediate, and he managed to reach kind of, with the help with the Soviet Union, to reach kind of a disengagement of forces agreement. So Sadat, firstly, he had very tough position, but he gave up later, his demands for an immediate withdrawal of the Israeli forces to the pre-1967 border. So by giving up, his kind of this demand for immediate withdrawal of the Israeli forces to the pre-1967 border, he managed to secure withdrawal of the Israeli forces, to align east to the canal. It actually corresponded to the Egypt's farthest advance during the war. And actually, with the Soviet Union, they tried to have two peace conferences in Geneva. Was called as disengagement, and they reached kind of disengagement of forces agreement 1, disengagement of forces agreement 2 in January 1974 and in September 1975. So according to this map, it designed, the lines of the disengagement of forces in January 1974. So according to this agreement, it stipulated the withdrawal of the Egyptian forces on the east side of the canal, to the west, of this line A, the solid black line A on the map. So the forces, had to be moved from the east side to the west side, the west of the solid black line A. And all Israeli forces, including those on the west side of the canal and the Bitter Lakes, they had to be deployed again to the east of line B, the light, the one in the middle, line B, and then the area between Egyptian and Israeli line, designed for Egyptian and Israeli lines, A and B, it was considered as a buffer zone, of disengagement, where like the United Nations emergency forces had to station in order to function and to implement its own functions, and the area east of the line C, it had like demilitarized, and it had like limited forces. The second agreement, kind of it did redraw some of the lines, and it had like new designated lines kind of. So according to like the agreement 2 in September 1974, disengagement of forces 2 in September 1974, all the Israeli forces deployed east of the line J, the one, the blue one here, line J, the solid blue one, and M, the M line, the green one. So all the forces like deployed east of these lines had to be deployed east of these lines, J and M, the green one and the solid blue one. And all the Egyptian forces west of the line designated as line E, the solid red one, all forces had to be deployed, west of this line. And the area between E and F, the solid and truncated, these red lines, and K and J and K, the solid and truncated, blue lines, it had to be limited, in weapons and forces. And the area between E and J, the solid red and the solid blue, it was a buffer zone in which the United Nations emergency forces like continued to perform its own functions. So they had like kind of negotiations before reaching this agreement in Geneva. The shuttle diplomacy of Kissinger and the United States managed to have like a direct talk near Ismailia. It was like on the South Cairo road, where the Third Army got surrounded by the Israeli forces. So, and then like the Geneva peace conferences and they reached this kind of disengagement agreements between Israeli forces and the Egyptian forces. And it was like, according to these agreements, as they stipulated, they were kind of a step towards a final and just and durable peace between the two sides. So actually it paved the way, for Camp David, because like, Sadat had no problem with like negotiating with Israel directly with Israel and approaching or shifting the alliance explicitly toward the United States. So it was actually like, kind of a clear decline of Pan-Arabism, and Egypt decided to have like, kind of to play a role of reconciliation in the Arab world rather than a leading role or like, to champion, this cause of Pan-Arabism. And it was very clear in Rabat Summit in 1974. Actually, Egypt spearheaded, the effort to declare the PLO to be like the only legitimate representative or representative organization of the Palestinian people. So meaning like, Palestine cause, or the cause of the Palestinian issue, which had been like, the main responsibility of the Arab countries. It was like, shifting of the responsibility from the Arab countries to the PLO as a representative kind of, or a government in exile to be responsible for the Palestinian issue or the Palestinian people. Um, Actually, the heavy dependence, economic dependence on the oil-rich states, actually Sadat resented, this kind of heavy reliance on the oil-rich countries, because, like, these kind of economic flaws or economic aids came with kind of conditionality. For example, like Libya promised, generous economic aid, but it was kind of conditional, and asked the Egyptian government to prevent, any kind of Gulf, like the Saudi and Kuwaiti and advertisements and from Emirates as well, to appear on the Egyptian newspapers. And Saudi as well in 1975 asked for kind of denaturalization policies and some reforms in the socialist economy in Egypt. So that what Sadat really kind of resented, or he didn't have kind of like he shifted his alliance, toward the United States, westwards kind of, but he had like no problem with aligning with the United States and to be kind of dependent on the economic aids from the United States, but not from like the Arab countries, for a strategic kind of reason. He needed like to gain like, the Egyptian ability of initiative, and it didn't come with the economic dependency on the oil-rich states, but with the economic dependency on the United States. Perhaps, Egypt would serve as a proxy for a great power in the region, and this would give him kind of a room to initiate, some policies, or to have kind of independent and autonomous position towards Arab leaders. So he had like a different preference of strategic alliances by approaching the United States, and to be less dependent on the Arab countries. And his main like priority was economic reconstruction, and to get kind of military support from the United States as well. And that's how he sold actually the idea of Camp David to Egyptians as kind of an economic rebirth of Egypt. So it was very like, in order to like eliminate any source of criticism and any kind of oppositional voices, so he had like, to focus mainly on the economic burden and the devastating, repercussions or results of the war. So that's why he had to he took actually a unilateral decision. He didn't consult, with his circles, with political circles. And he traveled. He made, he made this visit to Jerusalem, and he delivered his speech at Knesset. And he didn't consult this with anyone. He took like, this unilateral decision by directing, the entire foreign policy towards peace process, and to reconstruct, the social and economic conditions in Egypt. And this it was like, the peace agreement, or this kind of peace trajectory, was interlinked with the approaching the United States, because like this peace treaty or separate, peace trajectory would enable him to get like, some military and economic aid from the United States that would like, help with the task of rebuilding the economy. So we will try to examine like, to the Camp David process, and how both sides, and the mediating, role of the United States helped out, with reaching or concluding, this kind of peace agreement between Egypt and Israel, and the reactions of the Arab countries, and how actually it isolated, Egypt from the Arab region. So like, in order to examine this, in order to analyze, this kind of peace process, so we need to highlight the main purposes or the motives of the main parties, involved in the process, in the negotiation, and in the Camp David, peace process. So what was like the main purpose of Egypt? Egypt actually, like, needed, to conclude a separate, peace settlement, and needed, to improve on the ties with the United States. So as I mentioned, strategically, this would offer, some leverage, for the Egyptian leadership in the face of Arab leaders. And it would help, with breaking with the economic dependency on the oil-rich countries. Um, he would gain, kind of, he would retain, like Sadat, aim to retain, this ability to initiate, some policies in the face of the Arab countries, and to maximize, this Israeli concessions, to capitalize on on what happened in the war, in order to, that was like, his, like, initial position, in order to oblige, Israel to make much more concessions, perhaps to reach like comprehensive, peace settlement with the for the other Arab countries, and to recover, some other occupied Arab territories. For Israel, it was like, strategically, it was very kind of, it was an opportunity for them as well, in order to prevent like decoupling Egypt actually from the other Arab countries. This would prevent, any kind of collective action from the Arab countries, and it would, like, add more weakness to the pan-Arabism as an ideological force, like motivated, all Arabs against, the Zionist threat. And actually, like, Israel actually needed, to develop, its own, like, relations with the United States. So the Israeli, like, government didn't have any option to offend the American administration, or the main broad lines of the American foreign policy in the region. It was kind of a coincidence, like in the 1977, it's a new government, like the Likud bloc, came to power and put an end to like the Workers' Party that dominated the Israeli politics since 1940, 48, 49. So it needed, kind of support or public opinion. So it needed, like, to motivate or to encourage, the public opinion to support, the new government in the face of the Workers' Party opposition. And they had, like, this uncompromisable kind of stand, or non-negotiable stand towards the West Bank and Gaza. So they needed, like, to separate, any kind of discussions, or any kind of negotiations about, the Palestinian people, or the West Bank and Gaza, from, the talk about, Egyptian territories or other Arab territories. The United States, had a strategic interest in the region, in the Middle East, and the administration, needed, to reach, like, this comprehensive peace settlement in the region, in order, like, to not to have, like, any kind of to prevent, the outbreak of future wars in the region, and to increase, wanted to use, its leverage and its, like, power and influence, in order to conclude, this kind of peace agreements between the two parties. But this kind of these initial positions, or initial motives or purposes, of the countries or the parties involved in the peace agreement, both actually, like, had their own kind of tactical amendments or tactical preferences, that actually they amended according to the structure of the bargaining situation. So both parties, the main, like, two parties, Egypt and Israel. They had like different kind of preferences and different perceptions about the structure of the bargaining situation. So, firstly, like Sadat, according to the some archives, he actually trusted, the Carter or the United States administration, and he really believed that the United States would actually pressure Israel in order to make more concessions. So the way he perceived the role of the United States was much more than like mediating role. He actually needed the United States to be kind of a full partner in order to increase the leverage of Egypt in the face of Israel. And the United States as well, perhaps in the beginning they had this perception about the full involvement or the full participation as like the perception about the role of the administration as the full participant in the process. That was totally different for the Israeli government or the Israeli leaders. So they perceived the United States role as like and tried hard to limit the U.S. not only the perception but the actually the acted upon this. So they limited the role of the United States to be kind of a mediator, just to bridge the gap between Israel and Egypt. So obviously, like Israel had like military superiority over combined armed forces, and it like it actually occupied territories, so it had like kind of decisive advantage or bargaining kind of leverage in the face of Egypt by neutralizing the role of the United States from playing more like participant role or more to participate heavily or to get heavily engaged in the process. This would like maintain or would enable Israel to retain its tactical and actual edge. So actually the behavior, the bargaining behavior of Begin during the process, the negotiation process, it tried hard, to neutralize the United States and to consume or to spend, much time in order to pressure both, the Egyptian leadership and the American administration, and to maximize, the benefits from the bargaining situation. So, like internationally and realistically, Israel, had this kind of tactical edge, and it tried, to maintain it. So, in order like the exaggerated kind of their initial position, and they spent much time negotiating about some issues, basically on Sinai settlements, in order to avoid any negotiation or any kind of compromise on the West Bank and Gaza. So as time passed by, it exerted this kind of it worked in the interest of Israel, and exerted much pressure on the American administration, that became more inclined toward the success of the negotiation for its own sake, regardless of the terms of the provision of the agreement. So that actually threatened several times, to withdraw or to walk out, but he didn't actually, do that. So he had like limited options by relying like heavily on the United States in order to increase the leverage of the Egyptian side. So by like not neutralizing, but by like pressuring Carter or the American administration, Sadat actually had kind of limited options, and Israel like retained its own decisive advantage. The domestic context as well benefited more like Israel in order to maximize, the bargaining performance um, in the face of or in comparison uh, to Sadat or the Egyptian government. Um, Actually, because like it had to follow like they had, like as I mentioned, like reaching power um, after like a long period of dominance of another, like party. So they didn't need to they needed kind of support from the public opinion. So that's why they had to follow like the optimal strategies in order to establish kind of boundaries or to determine the boundaries of the other parties. So having like parliamentary government and public opinion, so they had like to revert back or to go back in order to double check. So they had like in addition to like this kind of coherent ideological belief in Zionism. So they had like more coherent kind of system of government and ideological underpinning um, that allowed for a little bit of deviation from the optimal position or the optimal strategies they aspired to. Unlike Sadat, we will talk more about the kind of the institutional setting in Egypt next week under Sadat, and how he kind of introduced some political reform measures. But he was like he neutralized, he actually dissolved the assembly, the National Assembly, when they tried to voice kind of opposition against the peace trajectory. And he made sure like the next parliament would have like more kind of supporters in order to eliminate any kind of any potential for political opposition. So he didn't like internally like he put like he had like to put like the Egyptian press under like strict supervision, and they had to self-censor themselves, otherwise he would like harshly crack down on them. So actually they had to abide by the instructions, and they had like to buy into the policies Sadat tried to propagate for. So he didn't have like any internal oppositions, and he didn't have any kind of incentive to cross check on his perceptions, to cross check on his kind of perhaps like wishful thinking about the role of the United States. Several times the most like prominent one, Hakel, actually, as a journalist, he warned him several times, and he wrote like some journalistic articles about the weakening bargaining position of Egypt, and the danger of relying heavily on the United States. But he actually managed to eliminate these kind of voices, and he actually dismissed Haeckel himself. So he didn't allow for any kind of different viewpoint or different opinion, and he didn't even consult with the delegation, traveled with him in Camp David. So the other parties, like the Israeli parties and the United States, like high officials, they had kind of easy access to Sadat as the only responsible figure for any decision or for any decision making. So he had to take. He could actually unilaterally, make any kind of decision without getting back to any representative body to have an approval on whatever he wanted to do. So actually, I'm not sure if we can evaluate, the results or the terms of the Camp David process or agreements, but we need to highlight, some like basic elements about actors' strategies, or the bargaining behavior, the initial bargaining position first of the actors involved in the process, and then the strategies and the what kind of benefits they try to maximize, and then in light of these kind of criteria, so we can objectively examine what kind of benefits both sides could have received or made in light of some domestic and international constraints and opportunities. For the initial bargaining positions of actors, so they had two main aspects, or two main issues actually to decide about. So the as I mentioned, the United States, the role of the United States, and then the Palestine, the Palestine issue, or basically the West Bank and Gaza. So they had two different, Egypt and Israel, they had totally or entirely different political stand or initial position towards the United States and towards the Palestinian issue. So for the United States, as I mentioned, Israel consistently tried to neutralize or to limit the role of the United States to to mediation only, in order not to increase the leverage of Egypt or Sadat. And Sadat actually tried to ask for full participation in order to pressure Israel. So he tried to get to get Carter to his side by pressuring Israel to make more concessions, but actually the Israeli delegation tried to mitigate these kind of pressures, or prevented them actually from appearing in the first place. For the West Bank and Gaza, so Israel had uncompromisable stand towards this issue. So they needed to perpetuate its own role. They didn't have any desire to give kind of self-autonomy or Arab self-rule. So that's why when Sadat tried to propose the proposal for autonomy, he actually introduced the proposal for autonomy, they instantly rejected it. And Sadat actually got really angry, because for him, this kind of continuation and perpetuation of the Israeli rule over the West Bank and Gaza, it offered no room for incorporating as he mentioned, undesirable or unwanted population into well articulated institutional setting or institutional configuration. And actually they throughout managed to prevent any kind of compromise or negotiation about the West Bank and Gaza. Here for the actors, for the actors' strategies and the benefits they tried to maximize. This is regardless of the actual or the initial bargaining position, or the bargaining structure, or the actual situation, or a specific performance or preferences of the actor. These kind of strategies they followed. The strategies these strategies actually maximized chances or minimized chances of attaining the desired outcomes. So we can kind of investigate or explain or highlight these kind of strategies deployed by the different parties, regardless of their kind of performance or preferences. Any kind of bargaining situation, it had the two central elements or features. The first one is uncertainty. So parties they were uncertain about the like the minimal position or the acceptable position, the minimal acceptable position of the other party. And they assume actually the rationality of the opponent as well. So each party, sought to maximize, benefits, and each party was uncertain about the minimal or the concession, the boundary of the level of concession the other party would offer. So this would offer kind of range of possibilities. So that's why like the most rational behavior was kind of projecting like a tougher stand than the actor actually, or the bargainer actually holds, in order to maximize the benefits and to exert more pressure on the other, and to gain much more benefits actually at the expense of the other party. So any bargaining situation, including this uncertainty and rationality, would lead to this kind of tougher stance regarding, the minimal acceptable position. Perhaps, it and not perhaps, like, most probably it entails, kind of exaggeration in order to gain much more benefits, or to maximize, the chances of getting, the desired outcomes. So from the very beginning, like, it was like this kind of asymmetric, bargaining or power structure between both parties. This is like the objectively, like, as I mentioned, like, the supremacy of the military forces of the Israeli forces compared to not only Egypt but the combined, Arab countries. And it occupied territories, so it had, like, more kind of advantage in the face of the other party, and time urgency as well. Like for Israel, like, it could have afforded, more rounds, of negotiations, and it didn't, like, feel the urgency of concluding, an agreement. So that's why, like, the passing of the time actually pressured more unexpectedly, like the Egyptian government and the United States. So that's why they needed, to reach a settlement or an agreement as soon as possible, compared to the Israeli party, that, they actually technically, actually, they could afford, different or more rounds of negotiations. And in order to abide by this kind of or to work within the framework of uncertainty and rationality, so besides projecting, tougher stance about your minimally acceptable position, like the bargainers, each party, had to be kind of unpredictable, and to avoid, giving kind of revealing information and giving too much information or assurance to the other party, in order to maximize the benefits or the desired outcomes they needed to achieve. So here again, the main issues, these parties, had to deploy different strategies, or they had, like, to move, in order to achieve the two targets, they had to move towards, in order to achieve, like, an outcome regarding them. It was like Sinai settlements, like the occupied territories in the Egyptian lands, firstly, and then the comprehensive, settlement for Syria, Jordan, and Palestine. So for Israel, like, the main target was, like, maximal demilitarization of in Sinai, in order to make any kind of military options more remote, for the Egyptian state, for Egypt. For Sadat, actually, like, he asked for a complete withdrawal and minimal demilitarization in Sinai, in order to have, like, some some sort of military existence, physical existence in Sinai. Um, Again, for reaching kind of a comprehensive settlement for other Arab countries, uh, Israel needed and actually worked for future rounds of negotiation, and focused mainly on the normalization of the relationship with Israel with Egypt, in order to separate Egypt from the entire Arab states. Um, for Sadat, actually, he had he had this initial position, and he had the proposals, but he didn't actually follow particular strategies in order to pressure the Israeli parties, the Israeli delegation, uh, apart from relying heavily on the United States to pressure them. So he actually, but he thought actually he wanted kind of a resolution, an a priori general agreement on main principles, especially the rights of self-determination for Palestinian people, and a clear, Israeli, a clear statement about, Israel intention to withdraw from the all Arab occupied territories. So that was the proposal he actually provided the American administration with. And he obviously depended heavily on the United States in order to pressure Israel to make these kind of concessions, but against his own expectations or preferences, like the time consuming from the Israeli delegation, put more pressures on the American administration, that pushed Carter to rapidly to reshuffle kind of priorities in order to reach an agreement, regardless of the content or the terms and the provisions of this agreement. So in order to highlight the Camp David process and how Egypt reached or opted for this trajectory of separate peace with Israel. So it had more to do with the personality of Sadat himself, and the system of the government in Egypt. So even before it was not like the negotiations during the Camp David process, that was the moves Sadat had to take before getting to this point at Camp David. So he actually according to this uncertainty and unpredictability thing, Sadat usually he made this unilateral moves by traveling to Israel without consulting anyone, without any kind of consultation with domestic circles or elite circles. And he didn't actually use this kind of, he made this unconditional move without using this in order to achieve any kind of political gains. And he used, according to Carter, actually he revealed unnecessary kind of information about his initial position or initial stand, and he didn't try to test the limit of the Israeli delegation. So regardless of the realistic asymmetrical power structure, the behavior of the Sadat himself and the personality didn't actually help to abide by this kind of optimal strategic or bargaining behavior. And he made this kind of clear statement about no more war. He declared this clearly in Israel. So it added more kind of he revealed more information about his ultimate stand or his main goal. And this, like the main preference of approaching the United States at the expense of the East Bloc or the Soviet Union. So that's why by like breaking the relations with the Soviet Union without getting kind of clear promises from the United States before even concluding the agreement with Israel, and without getting kind of assurance from the United States, it actually weakened, his leverage and negotiation or bargaining position. So this pattern actually continued during the Camp David process. So he exposed, or he declared his willingness to accommodate some modifications. So he handed in like the Egyptian proposal to Carter, and according to Carter as well, and then he delivered the message to the Israeli delegation that Sadat was willing to make any kind of modification on the proposal the Egyptian government submitted to the American administration. So he showed kind of flexibility that the other party, or the as a bargainer, tried to capitalize on, or to pressure in order to maximize their own benefits at the expense of Sadat or the Egyptian delegation. Again, without any some members of the delegation team as well, like complained about his kind of unilateral attitude, or like his inclination not to consult with them at all, and they tried to advise against some steps or procedures, but Sadat actually turned kind of deaf ears. So they complained about this kind of reckless attitude or carelessness from Sadat, and approaching more the United States. And that was like what Carter mentioned about Sadat as well. His behavior was kind of predictable, and it seemed like he trusted the American administration, especially Carter, too much. According to Carter, he seemed to trust me too much, in a reference to Sadat behavior during the negotiation process. So unlike the Israeli delegation, Carter continued, the Israeli delegation was very reluctant to trust us with any revelation of its real ultimate desires of areas of possible compromise. So like he put it briefly, like about the strategic or the different strategies deployed by both parties, the Egyptian and the Israeli parties. For kind of like, so again, like time benefited, the consuming time actually benefited the interest of Israel, not Egypt. So they spent too much time deliberating about Sinai settlement, and regardless of the tactically and genuinely aim to neutralize or to prevent any talk or any negotiation about the West Bank and Gaza, but it was like a very successful tactic in order to prevent any compromise or any agreement on the West Bank and Gaza. So according to the Minister of Defense, the Israeli Minister of Defense, Begin actually was stating his most extreme position, according to him, with the intention of compromising later. So regardless, so he tried to to project this kind of difficult and tough stance towards Sinai settlements, but they aimed they had the intention to compromise later, but it was just, that's why it was kind of a tool in order to prevent any kind of negotiation or compromise on other issues, most especially the West Bank and Gaza. And Sadat later mentioned this kind of strategy was used in order to deflect American pressures from other issues. He still trusted the United States intention in order to pressure in order to pressure Israel as the only strategic tool, he had um, during during the process, of the negotiation. So actually, Sadat tried, in order to, we will um, we will go into the terms of the provisions of the Camp David agreement itself, but in order to assess, the bargaining behavior or the bargaining situation of the bargaining structure of Sadat, it was very important in order to see how both parties, reach to specific terms of the agreement. Um, he actually capitalized on this, the new legitimate position he had as the hero of the crossing. Like, it was like the new legitimate, base of the Sadat regime, the canal crossing as well. So it offered him more room for to take more unilateral action, and to break with the legacy, to extricate, himself and Egypt from the legacy of Nasserism. So he didn't feel like, he had any kind of domestic pressures from any kind of different political oppositions, or from different other countries, or regional pressures from other Arab countries. So he tried, to have a comprehensive settlement for the other Arab countries, but he didn't actually he didn't have the tools in order to pressure Israel independently from the United States administration, and he didn't follow particular strategies, or time-consuming one, in order to increase the desired benefits, for this kind of comprehensive settlement, he initially aspired to. And otherwise, perhaps this kind of range of possibilities and different kind of strategic stand, both parties might have taken, it would have led to kind of a zero-sum game, if both parties tried to project a tougher stance, or to exaggerate their minimal acceptable position. It would have led to the failure of the process, and that was what Carter actually and Sadat actually didn't want to arrive at, the point both of them, they didn't want to reach. So we will talk more about the terms of the agreement itself, and how actually it reshaped the foreign policy of Egypt, especially towards the Arab countries, because actually they had this actually separated Egypt, or isolated Egypt from the Arab region. And it took several years until Mubarak assumed power in order to bring Egypt back into the framework of the Arab countries. But he actually tried to invest more, or to capitalize on this new legitimacy he gained of the winning the war, in order to take some unilateral steps, not only in formulating the broad lines of the foreign policy, but also the internal, to reshape the internal dynamics and the institutional configuration in Egypt. One important element during Sadat period is the Islamic revival that continued, and it did loom large over the Egyptian political landscape and the social sphere during Sadat and Mubarak as well. And he added actually to this, we will see next week how he introduced this kind of religious element to the constitution, in order to appease some Islamic forces, or in order actually to use them in order to neutralize leftist and Nasserist elements. And this had like, long-term implications and repercussions for the political dynamics in Egypt. And it actually backfired with his assassination, by some of the radical Islamist forces. So today, like a quick wrap up, so we tried to apply. We know like what foreign policy is, what are the main kind of elements or determinants of the foreign policy. So we need to look into the domestic environment and the regional dynamics after the death of Nasser, and how this kind of like military pressures and economic burden domestically and regionally, actually pan-Arabism proved to be kind of liability. It pushed Sadat gradually in a piecemeal fashion in order to break loose from Nasserism and pan-Arabism and anti-imperialism, and he actually narrowed down the imperialist the imperial power, or this kind of antagonism towards imperial forces to Zionist forces, and liberating Egypt, Egypt's lands. So that was like the main elements or the main determinants of the foreign policy, like land recovery first, and then reconstruction of the economy. So in order to achieve these goals, he had to shift alliance westward toward the to the United States actually, and he tried to break ties with he broke ties with the Soviet Union. And he had this resentful feelings toward the oil rich countries, and he made repeated several times a statement about Egypt had no more leading role to play in the Arab region, and Egypt sacrificed a lot for the Arab countries, and it was the time for the Arab countries to return the favor, in a reference to getting more kind of financial and economic aids from oil-rich countries. But he actually didn't like the political conditionality that associated with the financial aid. So that's why he had he exactly did the same like what Nasser did after Rabat summit in 1969, when he actually didn't get immediate support from the Arab countries, and that's why he resorted to the Soviet to depend more on the Soviet Union. He did the same thing. So that did the same thing, but in the opposite direction. So he didn't want to be heavily dependent and to rely more on the Arab countries, but he was okay to approach the United States and to get more financial and military support from the United States, and this would enable Egypt to have more leverage position in the face, or to exert more influence over the Arab countries as a proxy again for a great power like the United States. So he actually shifted the alliance toward the United States away from the East Bloc, and he tried to turn around. He just tried to cut Egypt or to have a different space from Arab countries by firstly shifting the responsibility for the Palestinian issue to the PLO. And actually he led the efforts, as I mentioned, in order to have a representative organization of the Palestinian people. So now it was not the duty of Egypt or Arabs in order to defend the Palestinian cause. It was the representative PLO in order to do the job. And this increased actually by his separate peace trajectory that actually led to more isolation of Egypt from the Arab region, and some and actually Arab countries like decided to boycott, the relation with Egypt, and he had like he was kind of okay with this with this attitude because he had different orientation of foreign policy. So we'll talk more about the repercussions of Camp David process and the terms of the agreement itself, and what kind of long-term repercussions or implications it had, and actually it remained with us under Mubarak until he managed to liberate, one piece, like one part of Sinai Taba, after he assumed power. Yeah. So we will perhaps have like a virtual office hour this week. So I'll make an announcement on Blackboard about the time. Perhaps it will be like on Thursday. So I'll post like the exact time in order to take your questions about this week's lecture. Okay, see you on virtually on Thursday. Bye.